Well, warmest greetings to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Christian Whistleblower channel. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Very, very happy to have you with us here tonight. As always, it's Monday night. It's time for The Last Stand. We have a great guest tonight, Robert Stanley, and unfortunately, we're one Robert short right now. Robert Bowery is on the road trying to get himself connected in, but he's having some technical difficulties. So, Robert, I think one Robert might be enough. What do you think?
I could just do double duty. How about that?
You could just talk to yourself. That's probably happened before once or twice, right?
God, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
So it looks like you're still in the beautiful Southern California.
What's left of it? Yeah, it's a lot of rocking and rolling here, and some people are saying the big quake's on the way. I'm sure it will be at some point. I don't know about right now. Hopefully, not in the middle of this interview.
Hopefully not. Now, have you actually been feeling the earthquakes down there?
Yeah, we're close enough that it was shaking the neighborhood, and fortunately, there was no damage here.
Excellent.
So, yeah, for now, but we're right on the San Andreas Fault. I mean, literally, I could just look out the window and see that whole, it's sort of like the boundary of the Joshua Tree National Monument on the, I think we're on the southwest end of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a pretty hairy place to be. I mean, a lot of energy and both good and bad. Kind of think this is essential, though, what's happening here with the planet. It's not just California, the whole planet's rocking and rolling. And I think it is serving a purpose.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that. One thing I found kind of interesting, Robert, is I know several people in Southern California, and you're the first one that I've talked to that said they've actually felt the quakes. You know, when we're here in Kansas and places east of here, we think that if there's a earthquake in Southern California, everybody feels it, and the buildings in downtown LA sway and almost fall like on the movies. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was in a remote area. Actually, the epicenter was, they call it Ridgecrest, but in fact, it was China Lake, which is the Navy's largest underground facility on the planet. And there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on out there. Now, as I said, there's earthquakes are happening all over the planet. We know that. But the fact that it happened there, it coincided with what Trump was doing at the National Mall on July 4th. And we started having the earthquakes over on the West Coast at that particular region. Now, that base, from what I understand, is actually one of the continuity of government facilities. So, in other words, there's another underground government like capital there for the West Coast.
Interesting.
For sure, they have them on the East Coast. You know, they called it Mount Weather, and then that accidentally got revealed, so they moved it to a different place. But there's at least two of those facilities for continuity of government. And as far as I know, they were activated during the events of 9/11.
Oh my goodness.
And
so Robert, I haven't heard any connection between Trump's event on July 4th and the start of those earthquakes. What kind of connections are being drawn on that realm?
Well, nobody else is even talking about it in that regard. They don't see any connection that
But you do.
Yeah, of course I do. That's what I do for a living. Look, that doesn't mean I'm accurate, but my impression of it is when he said that we're going back to the moon and Mars, we're going to go humans are going to plant a flag on Mars. And he also mentioned Space Force, by the way, because that was honoring the military. That whole July 4th celebration was not just honoring America. It specifically was honoring all branches of the military, including Space Force. Space Force was the only branch that did not have a flyover that day that we know of.
That's Robert. Am I a sucker? I was moved by that as a veteran. Yeah. I was actually moved by that salute to America.
As you should be, and I should also say thank you for your service, and I mean that sincerely, Jeff. No, I mean it's not that easy, and it's essential. I understand it's not perfect, but without the military, I mean, look, there's a lot that the military deals with behind the scenes that the average civilian is never going to know. In fact, even a lot of people that serve in the military have no idea of the depth and breadth of what you guys are really dealing with, and have been since at least 1942 with reptilian and extraterrestrials.
And we actually, next week, we have Laura Eisenhower coming on, so maybe we'll get to talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, most people don't have a clue, and it's by design. I think it would scare the crap out of people if they knew really how many servicemen have already given their lives, especially aerial combat, specifically in 1952. The book called "Shoot Them Down: UFO Wars of 1952" by Frank Christino Jr. It's a little known book. The foreword is by Stanton Friedman. Yeah, I'll send you a link later, but
okay.
Yeah, it's called "Shoot Them Down: Flying Saucer Wars of 1952" by Frank Fescino Jr. And he details in there the battles, the aerial battles that our military, specifically the Air Force, and the Navy, supporting the limited engagements with, as far as we can tell, with reptilians. Now, I know a lot of people say, "Hey, I've never seen a reptilian, so that's nonsense." Well, you should be lucky you haven't seen one, because typically they're not friendly.
So, Robert, you're telling me that the U.S. military has already actively engaged reptilian, I guess creatures would be our reptilian beings in aircraft.
Yeah, air-to-air combat.
Holy crap. I consider myself a fairly well-informed guy, and this is brand new news, and this is why we bring Robert Stanley on this channel so often.
Well, you should have to. I've only interviewed Frank once. He sent me a signed copy of his book. I turned it over. Silly me. I loaned it to a family member who's was at the time was active duty. Well, excuse me, reserve. He was a reservist, an officer who also worked at customs. And we were having a discussion one day, having a couple of beers, and I said, "Oh well," we just start talking about Project Paperclip,
right?
And we got into that whole thing. And like, yeah, they had UFO technology, but they had help doing it. And then I said, "Hey, have you ever read this?" And he looked at it. And he goes, "Where'd you get this?" And I said, "From the author." And he goes, "Well," he says, "I'd like to read it, but I'm not sure when I'll get it back to you." And I said, "Don't worry about it." And I never saw it again. But anybody can get a copy. The problem is this: most people never heard of the book, and also people read that and they think there's no way that one civilian could have got that much insider information that's above top secret. I mean, especially about the fact that the government covered up the deaths of multiple servicemen, airmen. These weren't just, and here's the other problem. They lied. They didn't just cover it up. They lied. They said, well, the jet ran out of fuel and crashed.
Oh, and they make it pilot error.
Pilot error, but we're talking about seasoned combat veterans. A lot of them had fought in Korea or World War II or both. And these guys knew exactly what they were doing. And they absolutely paid the ultimate price because they were badly outgunned. There was no technological parity there, but they did it anyway. They did the best they could, and they adapted the whole, this is the thing. When you're working in a team or a unit, those people become your family. And when you see your family members getting killed, you absolutely come to their aid in any way possible. You use any and all means to figure out a way to survive as a unit. And that's what they were doing. So I kind of understand why disclosure isn't happening, because people really would freak out if they found out the entire truth of the matter.
Robert, it's especially alarming to me. I wasn't a pilot. I was on an air crew, but you have to understand, I don't know if folks really get it. These people that are pilots, they're highly trained, they're well-trained, they're experts, they're beyond fastidious. Perfection is the norm. And it's a very macho, very much a huge pride situation. And for a guy that is flying an aircraft to be battling with a enemy like they were with these reptilians, to have them shot down and then have it being written off as pilot error is the ultimate insult of the supreme sacrifice. And it really just gets me. It bothers me terribly that would really happen. Robert, do you know, or is it in the book, did we ever have any of our great, brave flying aces that were successful in downing a reptilian craft?
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because
that's fantastic.
If you go to flatwoodsmonster.com, You'll see that's put together by Frank Festino Jr. And you'll actually see drawings that he did from multiple years of research, eyewitness investigation, interviews that he did with the people that lived in that area, Braxton County, called Flatwoods. That's where at least one of the craft that had been disabled by our military crashed. And the
flatwoodsmonster.com.
Yes, the drawings are fantastic. I don't know who did them, but you can actually see it. It's a very tall, very muscular, crazy looking, scary reptilian inside this personal transport. Now, this had come out of the creature, and the transport had come out of the crashed UFO. It was disabled by our military during an engagement that raged from Florida, the military bases in there that were attacked, and then the Navy followed them all the way up the coast because they were headed north ultimately into the DC area, and they threw all the assets that we had at that time, and we crippled at least two of them, and one of them passed over the DC area, and it was reported as a meteorite.
That is amazing.
September 12th, 1952.
And the thing, I'm just looking this up real quickly, but we have to understand 1952 in aviation, these were the very first jet aircraft.
Yes.
So some of our pilots were probably still flying the prop Corsairs.
And oddly enough, I believe they were called starfighters.
They were. It's the F4U Corsair Starfighter. And there's
what a
also
coincidence. They're fighting starships with these little, seriously. It's
like fighting a F-15 with a one of those rubber band wind-up airplanes and throwing rocks.
So the reptilians were using beam weaponry, like
on Star Trek,
like that, similar to that, and also they had some shielding. However, those starfighter jets did figure out that they could use, if they coordinated it properly, they could work it so that they could at least get some rounds in, and more importantly, they started using the fused proximity air-to-air missiles, and that concussion of that was enough to rattle these guys pretty hard. But
that is amazing.
Yeah, it's beyond amazing to me, Jeff, because I've been doing this for decades. But when I came across that, the reason it was extremely interesting to me, because I was working on my second book on UFO, the covert UFO extraterrestrial activity that has occurred in Washington, D.C. So when I read that account that I just described to you, my hair was standing on end. I was like, holy crap. No wonder they're not telling us about this stuff, because that was the same year. You got to understand. July of that.
And by the way, Robert Bauer, I see you there, but we can't bring you in. It won't allow you to be brought in over that phone line, unfortunately. So I guess we're going to have to just be one Robert short for this entire show. If you can get on a regular line, my brother, call us back. But unfortunately, I've tried several times. It's not going to let us be on. Sorry about that, Robert. Stanley, continue on.
So the second book I was writing at the time, back in 2010, I was living in Rhode Island, and at that point, I'd gotten over 800 or 900 UFO eyewitness accounts in Washington, D.C. from 1850 to 2010. And I was wrapping up the book, but then I found this thing I forget how I met Frank, but he sent me the book and I read it and I was like, okay, so that would explain why in July and part of August, when the military thought we were being invaded. According to Daryl Sims, he told me the military, Daryl was just born in 52, but he told me later when he served in the military in Vietnam and elsewhere, he told me through his contacts that they thought they were being invaded. They had trucks, carryalls with 50 caliber machine guns roaming around the city, taking up defensive positions. They also scrambled jets back at that time. And what really blew my mind was that I found Bill Burns wrote a piece about it was either one or two jets. I think it was, two jets that were sent up to intercept, and they vanished off the radar, were never seen again. Now, by itself, that sounds completely insane. But I found a corroboration from a second source that actually saw the radar tapes years later. And the guy was in publishing at like Bantam Books or something, and he got to see this. And so, we lost people for sure. And like I said, Frank Festino Jr.
Who wrote the book, Shoot Them Down, and what was the secondary title on it?
Flying Saucer Wars of 1952.
Okay.
And the thing is, like I said, Stanton Friedman wrote the foreword because he recognized that there was some validity to this. And that because Frank was being assisted by military personnel who could not come on the record themselves. So he became like the lightning rod for this information. And it got published. And like I said, most people in the UFO community have never read it. And those who have, a lot of them have dismissed it as just fiction or fantasy. I take it very seriously because, like I said, that's a very plausible scenario. And especially when he talks about the Flatwood Monster. So one of the craft that was disabled crashed, and the reptilian occupant got out. And I don't know if it meant to be scaring the local people, but they saw things.
Where did he crash, Robert?
Flatwoods.
Okay.
In Braxton County.
I just want to make sure we weren't still in D.C. with that.
It came from the Atlantic Ocean over Washington, D.C., going west.
Mm-hmm.
It passed over went and crash landed in West Virginia.
Okay. Thousands
of people saw the thing. And so naturally, when it crashed, people went to the site in the local area of Flatwoods in West Virginia. And some people saw this thing, were scared to death by it. And of course, the description of it was very distorted over time. And that's why when Frank went back there and started interviewing these people separately, and then, putting it all together and actually doing a drawing, had somebody, a sketch artist put it together, like a forensics investigation. Right. And then show the picture. Is that what you saw? And they're like, oh my God, they would freak out because it was a reptilian. And what would they know? How would you even describe that? Especially if it had technology, if it was wearing suit or it was in a personal transport. So that was one. That guy got, or whatever, that reptilian apparently got picked up by a rescue team of his own kind.
So they air evac him, his own people air evac him out of Flatwoods.
But there was another one. Or they must have. How else would they know?
How would they else they know? Yeah. Wow.
So
this is amazing stuff, Robert. I have never, ever heard
I know
this before.
But this is the thing. You can't be a little pregnant. When you talk about disclosure, people have no freaking idea of how deep this goes. The history of it is absolutely mind-boggling. It's enough to make you just wish you've never heard it before, because the implications are enormous. It's not just like, oh, hey, extraterrestrials are real. No. Not only are they real, they're a real threat.
Yeah. And Robert, let me just say again, let me reiterate this. Having been in the military for almost 7 years and having been on a flight crew, there is no doubt in the military part of my mind that pilots and people that are among air crews would do everything they possibly could to feed a civilian information, to get this information out when their brave comrades are fighting and dying and are being put down as pilot error. You don't understand. That is worse than calling their mother a whore.
I know. Well, yeah, because
this is real, folks.
They're so dedicated. In fact, look, I'm hosting a show on KGRA.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
Okay, and
what nights is it on, Robert?
I'm not trying to plug it, okay?
I know, but please tell us, because people want to hear your show.
All right, Friday and Saturday nights from, I got to think about this for a minute. Sometimes that's not, okay, it's 7 to 9 West Coast.
Okay.
That would be 10 to midnight on the East Coast.
And it's the Unicus Radio Hour.
Yeah, on KGRA. You can click on unicusmagazine.com to radio if you don't know how to get to KGRA, or you can talk stream live. Look, the point is this. I was being interviewed by we just call him Commander Cobra. I'm not going to give out his real name, but I know it.
Nor should you.
No, well, the guy's active duty, and he's worked in a lot of different agencies, including Air Force and Navy and Coast Guard and stuff. He does a lot of stuff. But he's a seasoned pilot is what I'm trying to tell you. He's flown a lot of different birds, and he's been in a lot of different situations. So he and I heard him talking to some guy one day, and I really enjoyed it. So I contacted this guy, Commander Cobra, and I said, you're doing a great job, and I'd like you to consider having me on as a guest to talk about my research of UFOs in Washington, D.C. over the past 7 years, 2 books, 800 pages, whatever. He brings me on. Hey, Robert.
Robert, I knew there was something I liked about you.
Yes, absolutely. Good name. Good timing, too.
So please continue on with your story.
So anyway,
I've been listening. It's great.
Oh, good. I'll try and get to the point here. So
now, take your time. Don't leave anything out. This is fascinating, groundbreaking information.
Well, anyway, so we had a conversation, a really in-depth conversation about my investigation and ultimately the surveillance that was performed on me. Like I showed you those pictures of the military helicopters that came to my house there.
You did.
In the civilian neighborhood. You know, that doesn't happen every day, thank God. And it was very intimidating to say the least. But here's the bottom line. I think it was like a year ago or so. I was still in Hong Kong, and I'm talking to Commander Cobra on his show. This was like the second or third time he had me on. And in the midst of the break, I said, I'm thinking about bringing my show back. And he goes, really? Oh, well, you got to come on KGRA. And the producer said, yeah, Robert.
Oh, you told me this story before. Yeah, I remember.
But the reason I'm bringing it up is because Commander Cobra is what the kind of person you're talking about. We were discussing. My dad's brother was also a pilot. He served, highly decorated military pilot, survived Battle of Midway.
Ooh.
Yeah, he was there for that.
Not many pilots did. That was it was terrible, the losses at Midway, and what brave men.
Yeah, I mean, it's just extraordinary that they could do something like that. But anyway, so I've been fortunate. I was also really close friends with Robert Dean, Command Sergeant Major Robert Dean, before he passed away. So I have an affinity. I'm not a military person, but I understand the mindset and the dedication and the camaraderie. And I've been lucky to experience, friendship with people like that. So I get it. It's beyond just like, hey, buddy, let's go have some beers. It's not like that. There's some other level of connection there. I think it's a spiritual thing, honestly. They're fighting. They're not just fighting to defend this country. I think they're actually defending the planet.
Right. And, Robert, a lot of people don't like the military. They, have opinions about America that it's not what we think it is. And be that as it may, the one thing that we've always got to remember is that the brave men and women that put on that uniform, they don't put it on because they're Republicans. They don't put it on because they're Democrats. They don't put it on because of any of the ills or to, promote the demagogues that run this country. They put it on out of love and service to others. And again, it still sticks in my craw that these people are fighting freaking aliens in first generation jet planes, and sometimes winning, most of the time losing, and it's getting written off as pilot error. Folks, I'm telling you, this Flatwood this Shoot Them Down book about the UFO wars, I'm telling you, this guy got straight information from military people. Not only do I trust Robert Stanley, but I trust my gut, and it's telling me that these are pilots feeding him information. We need to get this book. And Robert Bauer, welcome in from the Unibobbers cabin out there in Minnesota. We're glad that you're able to make it.
Well, it's been a challenge, but thanks very much for putting up with all of the technology and trying to get things connected. Robert.
Yeah, we can't. I had to mute you. We can't even hear you. There's something bad wrong with your audio there. I don't know if you've got the show playing in the background, but it's unintelligible, and it even hurts. It sounds like that reptilian that they shot down. And while Robert's getting that fixed up, Robert Stanley, again, this just blows my mind. And did they have any of the reptilians got shot down where they recovered any bodies?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you. So the one got picked up, and then there was another one that had crashed that was so badly physically damaged that it died. And that was recovered by our military. So that's at least one case that I could say is pretty credible enough that I would report it as potentially the military grabbed a reptilian in as a combatant. By the way, prisoner of war. Even if you're dead, you're still a prisoner of war, right?
Absolutely. So, do you think they still have him somewhere? Is this the alien autopsy that we read about?
No. Those were not. No. If you look at those drawings by flatwoodsmonster.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, those don't look at all. They're huge. These guys are, like 8-10 feet tall, very muscular, very scaly, bony, whatever. No, they don't. Really, they're reptilian.
So you look like Jay Campbell with scales.
Something like that, I guess. No, they really are very extremely muscular. I don't know if they work out or if they're just born that way. Whatever it is, they're
probably that'd probably be through breeding. You would think over several thousand.
Something like that. That could be, or maybe those guys were super soldiers.
Great point. Maybe they're genetically engineered soldiers.
Yeah, I think so. And
this was in the 50s, Robert Stanley.
Yeah. But I mean, look, the first crash was in Missouri in I'm going to say around 1940.
That was supposed to be complimentary to Jay. I wasn't trying to be mean at all, because Jay's buff.
He is ripped. Yes, of
absolutely.
Course. But I don't think he'd stand a snowball's chance of hell with a reptilian.
No, I don't think he would either. You're looking much better, Robert Bauer. You got a little, I think it's a solar flare coming over your left shoulder, but that's all right. And at least we can hear you and you're not frozen. So,
well, I tell you, when 5G comes out and we all get connected to the Internet of Things, this will not be a problem.
Cool. Of course, we won't live long under the 5G, but at least we'll have great internet while we do.
Yeah.
Well, I think that some of this technology that's coming up, I think the 5G is actually going to probably just be an interim step. They've already got 6G in the works.
Wow.
And I think that they know that, the 5G, originally from what my research indicates is that it was something that was done for medical purposes to focus on DNA.
Wow.
Interesting.
And they used it to go in and do the actual mapping and getting into the DNA itself. But Robert, first of all, my apologies to everybody for being late. Trying to get in is what I've been trying to do for the last 45 minutes. But now there's finally a good signal. I am using a new, the Sprint MiFi, which I got to tell you, it's basically internet in your pocket. Wow. when you can get a signal. Right. And my upload and download speed has been just as good as my 2-wire.
Interesting.
Which is one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I got a chance to test it out here on the road. Robert, pleasure to meet you and to hear these stories. You're obviously familiar with Richard Dolan's work.
Yeah, of course. He's also a host on KGRA.
Yeah, and the 1952 series of events, it spanned about 18 months, I think, from what I've read. It was
ongoing. Yeah, look, the military only wanted to. They were very much in control of the press, just like they are now. So the press only reported it 3 times, and it made headlines around the world. July and then again in August. But it was ongoing. In fact, it happened over 80 times in just 1952 alone. We didn't see.
And it's only reported those 3 times
by the media because they were. And as a matter of fact. Okay, so what Bob Dean told me before he passed away was that, wait a minute. It was, it was another
real
guy.
Quick, while you're thinking, just to back you up again, I had a friend when I was in Europe, stationed in Europe, who was the head of the Stars and Stripes newspaper, which is the de facto military newspaper. And he said they had one rule for their reporting: boring and safe.
Yeah, well, safe, yeah, for national security. Okay, it was, another Air Force officer, and I'm blanking on his name, but he had the largest, he was out in Arizona. He had all the largest UFO photographic collection. Colonel Wendell Stevens. All right. So I interviewed him for my first book called Close Encounters on Capitol Hill. And I asked him, where did all the UFO photos go from 1952? Because it says in the public record that there was hundreds, if not thousands of people in the mall regularly because they all had cameras. Most of them were tourists. But they were the overflights were so regular by these UFOs that people were going out there and taking pictures and or movies.
In the 1950s.
I told you 52. It happened at least 80 times that I can find in the public record.
I'm dumbfounded. I really am.
Well, they've done a really good job of covering this thing up. It's like hidden in plain sight. And that's why I encountered a lot of resistance when I first started. You were asking me about Coast to Coast. I had to speak to the producer, Lisa, for about an hour and explain to her what this book was about, because she hadn't read the book. She didn't know who I was. And she was very skeptical, as you should be.
And Lisa Lyon is a tough nut.
Yeah,
She's really good at her job.
Especially a cold call like that. It wasn't that I wanted to sell a book. I wanted to report a story that I had compiled. And it's a very in-depth story. So anyway, part of this is that what Colonel Wendell Stevens told me was that the military went around the DC area confiscating cameras and film of the UFO activity because they didn't want it to get out. They, in fact, even confiscated newspapers that had published stuff. They went and swept them all up as best as they could.
Didn't they do the same thing with the Eisenhower encounter?
Which one are you talking about out here in California?
I think it was out in Arizona when, or was it Truman, where they published in the media that he had some severe toothache. And
he was in Palm Springs where I am now, and they took him up to Edwards. I think it used to be called Muroc, and now it's called Edwards. And yeah, supposedly he had a direct communication with Nordic extraterrestrials, and they offered his assistance, but I would say his administration, the people around him, declined it.
And remember, this is 7 years after the end of World War II, so it's still, there's not a whole lot of warm, fuzzy feelings going around the planet at this time.
No, a lot of paranoias. That was kind of what was going on, and especially so 1952, Cold War. They didn't know. They claim they didn't know, but obviously at the highest levels, they did know what they were dealing with. They just didn't know how to really protect us. They knew we were outgunned for sure. And that would have caused a panic. It would still cause a panic. Like, I mean, come on, this thing with the New York Times talking about the Pentagon is talking about a threat program assessment. Duh. How many years have you told us there was no threat? Officially, there's no threat, but on the other side of the aisle, you're saying, oh no, there is a threat and don't worry about it. We're taking care of it. We're investigating.
So since 1952, our government has been very well aware of at least not one, but two alien species that are very active within the atmosphere of this planet.
Yeah, actually, what Bob Dean, Command Sergeant Major Robert O. Dean, what he told me when I first interviewed him was that the assessment that he saw at SHOC, the Supreme Headquarters in Europe, I think it was in Belgium. So it was a cosmic above top secret clearance that he looked at this report that was in a vault. He was allowed to see it. He couldn't do anything much more than just look at it and leave it in the vault. But he said that it was really obvious to him when he read it that they were concerned about a threat. That's the whole reason they put together the threat assessment, and they paid a lot of money for it, and they hired some of the best minds on the planet. And he said that they were aware of at least four particular groups that were constantly coming and going off the planet. That was the small grays, the tall grays, reptilians, and humans that looked just like us. Well, because obviously we're all related.
Robert, did they say that if any of them had pointy ears and bad haircuts?
No, but the problem was the Pentagon, what Bob Dean made a point of this. He said that the group that they were most concerned about was the ones that are human, because they could be anywhere, including the Pentagon or the White House. Well, that doesn't.
Just to get a little perspective on Command Sergeant Major, I don't know if he was Marine Corps or Army, but
he was Army. He was Army, but he'd also served in FEMA as a director. He was in Arizona, but he did a lot.
Yeah, but Command Sergeant Major of the Army is the highest ranking enlisted man in the Army. So this is not a slouch.
No. He got to be good friends with Colonel Corso before Corso passed away. And I was really privileged to know Bob as a friend. I don't know why he liked me, but he did. And
we know why, Robert. Come on.
No, but I mean, he treated me with this like level of respect that I couldn't quite fathom. Mm-hmm. All right. Because I mean, I was just a novice. And when he first met me, it was just like an instant bond. And I just thought, wow, what's going on here? I didn't.
Robert, you're going to hate this, but I've had the chance, folks, to sit down across from a dinner table with Robert Stanley, in addition to being with him on the radio. And when you sit down with him, you're immediately touched by the things that Bob Dean was. The integrity, the trueness, the genuineness, and just the real humanity of this man. So it's an honor and privilege to have you with us, Robert Stanley.
Well, thank you. I looking back, I think what Bob saw in me was something that he embodied as well, which is when you guys take an oath to defend this country, the Constitution of this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I know I never took the oath, but I didn't have to. That's just innate in my character. I don't want it to get tied up in all the red tape, but I'm just here to help. We jokingly call it Jedi, whatever, but
yeah.
But the truth is,
you're a Jedi journalist, Robert.
Yeah, I'm a Jedi. Anyway, the bottom line is that we're all involved in this, whether we like it or not. And the people who have the more information you have, the greater responsibility you have to do something with it for the betterment of all mankind, not just a few people that are like chasing lights in the sky or trying to sell a book. That's I've always thought that was just idiotic.
Absolutely. Robert Bauer, what's your take on this? You're on mute, my friend. You're on mute, or I haven't muted you, but you're there's no sound coming through. Jeez. Still no sound coming through.
The gremlins are really hitting you tonight.
The gremlins are really hitting Robert tonight. That's too bad. Now, you said that and help me please complete the loop for me, because I'm not quite getting it. Trump's 4th of July salute to America, simultaneous or in the same time frame as the China Lake thing. What is the connection that you're making there? Okay,
it wasn't just to celebrate all the exceptionalism of America, although I appreciated that.
Absolutely.
It was to honor all branches of the military, including Space Force.
And he did go out of his way to say, and soon the Space Force.
He said, yes, exactly. He went through all the branches and then said, Space Force, it's coming soon. And the problem with that is it's already here. It's been here for a long time. They've been doing it covertly. And I can send you more information on that if you really want to look into the origins of Space Force. It was actually Space Fleet or whatever you want to call it. He's calling it Space Force. Whoever told him to say that was saying it for a reason, because we're talking about the Force. We're talking about the Force.
Personally, I wish he'd called it Starfleet, but that's another thing.
No, but it's okay.
Robert, can you say something else? See if we can hear you. You are still muted, my friend. I don't understand. That's terrible. But do you think the China Lake is the Space Force's flyover?
There's clearly alien technology there, what we would consider advanced alien space technology. I think we developed, quite a bit of it ourselves over decades. Here's the funny thing. When you look at, I had to go back after this event and think about not only what I saw, the alien technology I saw there one night back in the late 80s, but also
maybe you'll tell us that story too.
William Tompkins I remember him talking about, he was the first person to really talk about what was out there. And when it started, Caltech was the first agency to go there and set up something. I think what they were doing was mapping all the ancient underground facilities there.
Oh, and Robert, the old legends about reptilians under LA, does this all tie in?
Yeah, it's because it's not that far away. In fact, right next to China Lake, if you go a little bit east and up, is Death Valley, specifically the Panamint Mountains. And there's all kinds of rumors of an ancient advanced civilization that is living inside that mountain range. That used to be a massive lake. Death Valley used to be a huge inland sea or lake. Whoop.
It's one too.
It's now you sound like you're on the moon or.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, it's not working, brother.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just barely, though. Very garbled.
Just barely. Well, yeah. Continue on, gentlemen.
All right. Okay. There was something I was trying to get to with Bob Dean, since we've got so many Roberts here tonight.
Yeah, Roberts are wild.
One of the things that he told me in confidence was that he was a Knight of Malta, which if you don't know,
what is that, Robert?
Okay, well, like George Bush Sr. was a Knight of Malta. When you talked about Bob's rank as a command sergeant major in the Army, but he'd also worked for NATO. He'd also worked for FEMA. But the Knights of Malta, I don't want to spend the whole show talking about them, but they are extremely influential. They are a force to be reckoned with. Okay. So they're beyond the Jesuits, in my opinion, as far as their influence is concerned. They are part of the Vatican. if I understand it correctly. But when he told me that, it all kind of lit up in my mind was, oh, so you're sanctioned to talk about these things, but not exactly from the U.S. government. You're sanctioned by the world government, because the Vatican is a global entity. Okay.
So he was sanctioned by a higher power, you could say, pardon the pun, and maybe
absolutely. And it's also why he repeatedly referred to Jesus in his lectures and in our conversations. He was adamant that Jesus was actually part of a benevolent what do you call it? Not an influence, intervention.
Really?
That's what he claimed.
That's fascinating.
So I don't know if it's true, but I'm just saying these guys, and I know what he was telling people publicly was only the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
He never talked. He talked about the study of the threat, but if they perceive the threat, they're going to take action. It's an actionable threat.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What's up? Right. Bob Bauer, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great now that the technology seems to be kind of cooperating for a moment.
All right.
So I've got a question for you. And this is one of the ones back in my religious experience when I had a Christian ministry in the 80s. And by the way, you and I are from the same time and place. I was born in Long Beach, California back in 57.
Wow. In what year? 67?
57.
57. Oh, okay. I'm 50. I was in 59. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And it was an idyllic place to, be born and raised and all that good stuff. But when I got into, my spiritual trying to find out who am I, why am I here, and where am I going path, one of the questions that came to mind was, people would say, well, when you meet God, what are you going to say? And my first question is, how much of it was me and how much of it was you? And as I thought more about that, especially as I continued my journey trying to figure out, what is this thing we call reality? And got into the whole aspect of an entire extraterrestrial being and beings and being them that there. One of the things that I've noticed is that, boy, are these guys not only stealthy, they seem to do a real damn good job of keeping themselves under wraps. But if there was indeed a threat, if they were here to take over, if they were here to manipulate us in some way, shape, or form to their benefit, it would seem that there would be, at least logically, a lot more overt activity, a lot more sightings. I mean, now you've got the ubiquitous Uniblab all over the place. Everybody's taking pictures, they're capturing audio and their video and so forth. And you would think that real hardcore evidence of these entities, and I think there's probably a dozen or more.
Oh yeah, easily.
That are out there. I also think that I heard it was back around 2009-10 that there was an evacuation, especially the ones that were underwater and underground in various facilities.
Well, there's a whole new thing there, yeah.
And I think it ties back to what you were saying in the earlier part of the show about, these folks just kind of giving up or just saying, we're out here, we got a better deal. And they left some scragglers that are still causing some mischief. So one of the things that you'd mentioned about the 4 different entities, I think it was Bob Dean or
right. It was.
Had mentioned to you, one of them being humanoid. What's your thoughts on Valiant Thor?
I got to meet Frank Stranges a couple of times. He's the guy that wrote the book, also a minister. He's passed away now. But he was an interesting character, quite a storyteller. And the book is interesting. I don't know how much of it is accurate. I think there's a lot of misinformation that's coming from intelligence agencies to intentionally mislead people for their own good, which I'm not really a fan of this, but I understand why they do it. Like I said, because if you really go down that road and you start to show everybody everything about the good, bad, and the ugly, some people would lose their minds. For sure they would. Especially if it was coming from official sources and there's no place to hide. Loading a gun isn't going to do a hell of a lot of good. And,
Not against a 10-foot tall reptilian.
No, unfortunately, it won't. And so a lot of people would absolutely lose their mind. Since you guys are both pastors, I want to ask you a question about the
former.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know you could be that. I didn't know you could do that. Were you defrocked or?
Actually, I was defrocked. I like to call it the left foot of fellowship. They give you the right hand of fellowship when you come in, and the left foot of fellowship on the way out. So
the first thing.
Thanks for bringing that up, Robert. I appreciate that.
The first thing that happened to me is I was caught in the pews with one of the choir girls, and they said, "Aren't you a man of the cloth?" And I said, "Well, yeah, just."
Well, not right now because the cloth's all on the floor. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be here all week. Tip your waitress. Robert Stanley, yes, since we're both pastors.
The big question I wanted to ask tonight is your opinion on the transfiguration of Christ on the mountain before he was crucified.
Do you want to take that one, Mr. Bauer?
Most people won't talk about it.
No.
Oh, and now
now he's muted again. And now he's muted again. I'll answer that, Robert Stanley, but let me pose this. Now, I'm hell on Jesus, plastic Jesus, fake Jesus. I'm really not Jesus' biggest fan, and if he's real, he's not mine. But I'm convinced that the government or the powers that be and that are thankfully passing away at least want to have a great false flag extravaganza with a fake Jesus returning. Let's say that they're the reptilians, the bad guys. If we've got these tall Nordic Pleiadians or whoever we want to say that they are, is it possible that they might want to leverage our religious mythos in a positive way and maybe bring back a good Jesus so people will accept and help? And then we could literally have competing second comings, a bad Jesus and a good Jesus. Neither one of them are really Jesus, but extraterrestrial entities trying to leverage our religious mythos. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure, that's possible. That's one of the reasons I asked you about this, because that when I was listening, I watched the whole thing live on Fox when that 4th of July celebration on the
Me too, and it made me cry. I will tell you, I'm a man enough to tell you, it brought tears to my eyes.
As it should, because if you're an American and you love the country, specifically the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because I think that was what was also being put on display there to kind of help people remember what the foundation of this country is all about. So, but I was listening intently to the words of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I've heard the song many times, but
I know I was too, Robert, and it's horrible.
Well, it's so, but here's what I'm going to paraphrase. But when they said Christ was born across the sea, and he had a glory in his bosom to transfigure you and me. Now, as you know, glory literally means light, light in his heart. And the transfiguration, this is why I'm asking this, because this is when I heard them say that, I'm like, wait a second. I'll bet you most everybody listening to that song has no idea what was just said to them, that Christ was bringing the light. So whether it's fake or not, there's some aspect of this that is actually beneficial to us, sort of like a bitter pill that we have to swallow in order to get that light, restore that light in our heart. And that will transfigure, that does transfigure us. It's a very strange term. Most people don't want to discuss it because we don't know what the hell transfiguration is all about. How could some guy go up on a mountain and start to glow?
Well, whatever he was and whomever he was, and assuming that he really was, and that's a big assumption for me with no empirical or objective data, but he obviously was taking off or phasing out of whatever it was that he was humanly, and we were seeing the Pleiadian, the reptilian, the glorified, whatever it is, the real spirit, body, spiritual essence of he himself, which was, as you said correctly, light. Now, it's up to us was it false light? Was it real light? Was it ET light? Was it Pleiadian light? Was it reptilian light? Boy, you have really helped, number one, help us thought more, but we've muddied the waters, Robert. We got a whole lot more to think about. Can you say something to us, Bauer? See if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Is this thing on?
We can't. You're frozen in a very pensive pose, but we can hear you. No, we can't hear you.
Every time he's about to disclose.
Every time he's about to disclose something, we can't hear him. That's terrible.
No.
We can't hear you.
It came up and said I was muted by the host.
No, I've been when it goes.
Okay.
But now you're not muted. And you look like you're in a bad Japanese movie. But go ahead. Now he's muted again. I didn't do it.
Something's not right.
Something is not right. So, Robert, do you think that both the aliens, Robert Stanley?
Yeah.
Do you think that both alien groups may have at least contingency plans to use the Jesus mythos?
Yeah, but ultimately, as I've told you before, what's really going on here, as far as the benevolent ones, is that everything is being revealed.
Mm-hmm. Was Jesus an alien, in your opinion? The Jesus we know about in the Bible? You
mean like a Nordic extraterrestrial? Yeah, I think the original concept that has been completely distorted was that I don't think he was a savior as much as he was a way shower. Mm-hmm. You know, he is an example. Mm-hmm. Follow me. Don't do what I say. Just do what I do. You know, I mean.
Yeah. And Robert, he actually very clearly stated, "I am not of this world."
Yeah, and he said his father's kingdom was not of this world either.
Right, both of them. We hear you now, Bauer.
Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Don't move. Don't move.
Just don't move. I'm going to stay right there. So on the transfiguration.
Ta-da.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Spit it out quick.
I think that was actually.
Oh my God. And with the light behind him and everything. Wow.
That's horrible. It just froze right at that time. Oh my, that's unbelievable. But right. Yeah, I mean, he did say I'm not of this world. My father's kingdom is not of this world. So, I mean, and I'll ask the question, was he inky?
No. A lot of people ask me this. I don't know. I know. I think. Okay, look,
Robert, you are the inky expert. No, the de facto inky expert.
Yes, but I'm not an expert on Jesus because there's so much misinformation or disinformation that's been put out there about this entity. Okay, one of the books that was sent to me by a listener on my show is called "The Way Home," by some guy claiming to be Michael, and claiming that he was Elijah, claiming that he was Jesus, or is all of those characters. And then
Michael the Archangel.
Yes. Wow. Whatever that may mean to you. Mm-hmm. But ultimately he claims to be the Jedi Prime. He was the first Jedi.
You know, Jehovah's Witness doctrine teaches that Jesus and Michael the Archangel are the same entity.
Well, but this book has nothing to do with that. It was allegedly.
No, I'm just saying that there is some history for that. He's not the first guy to come up with that idea.
Well, it might explain why when he allegedly went up on this mountain with, I think, 2 or 3 of his disciples.
Yeah, he had Peter, James, and John, I think.
So they went.
Remember what Peter said? Peter said, "Hey, look, it's so great up here. Let's just build 3 tabernacles. We'll stay here forever."
No, I don't think.
Jesus is like, "Get your ass back down and go to work."
I don't know. Okay, you're reading a different version, but the point is.
Well, he didn't say it quite that way.
No, here's what happened. He started to glow. Jesus started to glow. That they never explain why, but he did. He started to emit this light. He was radiating this light.
Right.
And at that point, 2 other beings manifested next to him. They claim was Moses and I believe Elijah, right?
That's what they claim. Right.
Okay, right. So and then there was a voice or a cloud above them that was saying, "This is my son, with whom I'm well pleased."
Which one was the son?
I'm thinking Jesus or whatever, Michael. I don't know. This is what I'm asking you. This is really, really confusing. And the reason I bring it up
is, by the way, there's 4 races right there. If anybody's keeping count: Jesus race, Moses race, Elijah race, Father race.
Oh, okay. Well, the point I'm trying to get to is here. When I met Enki in that other dimension, that's what he looked like. He was glowing entirely. So when you ask me, was Jesus Enki or Enki is Jesus, there has to be some familiar relationship for all these groups. This is one of the reasons I think we've been so easily deceived, is because one of the greatest lies is that somehow there's separate races or groups or families, when in fact we're all family, no matter where you are or what color or language or whatever. All that crap is just nonsense. And at the end of the day, we're all part of the same creation.
Absolutely. Robert Bauer, tell us about the Transfiguration in your words.
I think that it was more of a symbolic expression of, this whole thing about light. I mean, the New Age has capitalized on it and made it something that is just metaphorical, but I think it's also very relevant to what Robert was talking about earlier in the show about how we are going through a cosmic place in the cosmos that is and has a different energetic expression in its materium. The Russians figured this out back in the 80s, I believe. And this whole thing about going into Aquarius and, seeing the light, becoming the light. Some people, if you believe in incarnations and multiple lives and the iteration of the soul and the consciousness, some people just aren't ready for it. Some people are. And I find the whole transfiguration story something that, again, to me, it's metaphorical from a spiritual perspective. I find it very fascinating that it's happened back when people were not necessarily thinking about these kinds of things and in these ways. And it was written down. And as you said, Robert, it's something that is entirely confusing based on just the narrative that we've been given. Now, that narrative has obviously been highly mangled. You look into the Book of Enoch and a number of the other books that were not included by King James and the gang. There's a lot more information about what actually was going on, the way that reality was shaping itself, and the way in which humans were playing a part of it. I think that it also has something to do with, if you look at the Anunnaki and Leal and Enki and those stories and the Sumerians, and you go way back, and then you start looking at some of the other information about where the races actually originated from. They say that of the 7 races, I think the whites came from underground. Asians came from Mars. There was Tiamat, where there was other, where the Africans came from. And if you look at the genetic makeup and the way that each individual race manifests itself so individually, it's hard to take anything seriously, in my opinion, that if you're not looking at it from an energetic consciousness perspective in the transfiguration model, then you get separated out into these various races and various aspects of the way in which individual genetics manifest themselves. And you throw in things like incarnations. I mean,
Well, he got a good part of his answer out there, Robert
in
Stanley.
Africa, right?
Yeah.
A long time ago. I could have been an Asian. In fact, the reads that I've had, I'm on my 26th iteration according to the psychics and the astrologers. I've been a Chinese monk. Apparently, I was some aquatic type being and swam with the dolphin. I mean, to me, these things all seem like they are plausible. They're not out of the realm of exploration and, possibility from my perspective. But I think that the transfiguration, to answer that question, I guess, in a long way and sum it up, I think it's metaphorically a way in which the spirit of the soul and the consciousness and the energy therein is where it is all at. And I think that's what was happening at the metaphorical story of the transfiguration.
Well, there's certainly an aspect of that. And it's interesting to get, Robert Stanley and I kind of on the same page. Robert Bauer with a more conservative, more of a scholarly, allegorical interpretation. Hearing what we've said, Robert, what is your take on the transfiguration? Robert Stanley.
Yeah, and it's called superconductivity. That's what we would call it.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's not a supplement.
I was wondering where I could get it and how much it was going to cost.
Yeah, monoatomic gold is what some people are thinking. No, it's not that. It's that he was tapping into the web of light that I've told you about, which is the force.
Mm-hmm.
And it really has something to do with the mitochondria.
Robert, what have I told you this? I know I'm breaking in, but what have I told you this? The word Christ is a horrible translation from Greek. It doesn't mean Christ at all. It's a stupid, terrible translation. It means You're not going to believe this. It means the anointing, the consecration, the flow.
Oh,
The flow.
the flow.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about a web of light, it's not static, it's kinetic. Just like electricity flows through the wires, and when you plug into it, it animates things. The same is true for this web of light. Most of us are blind to it. I was shown it up on a mountain where I met Enki back in the 80s, 1980s.
Sounds familiar, Robert.
But I didn't light up like a Christmas tree at the time, but they were showing me that everything is connected to this web of light. And yes, the light flows like water, like rivers and tributaries. It flows everywhere.
And Jesus said, out of your belly will flow rivers of living water.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's mistranslated. They didn't understand what light was.
Right.
If you saw somebody had a light they think it was on fire, or they would call it like the glory, which is it's not an accurate term. It's kind of a vague thing. So here's why another reason I'm bringing it up is because the only other reference I found to something like that was the birth of Noah, whatever his real name was, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Utnapishtim, or whatever his name really was.
It said he was bright and shiny.
Yeah, and it freaked his dad out because he said, "That's not my baby. He's the blood of the gods," and so he fled. So yeah, Noah is another example of this. There's also reference in somewhere. It's been a while since I looked at it. The men with shining faces. Yeah,
and Moses, when he came down off the mountain, his face was so shiny that people couldn't look at it. And the brother grew horns too, by the way, but that's another show.
So, Robert, what's your thought on if you're talking about this web of light, which I totally subscribe to? I think that light, Walter Russell and his work was spot on. I think and Tesla as well. Yeah. What's your take on the electric universe?
Yeah, that's getting much closer to it. I've already seen examples of graphic examples that are they pale in comparison to what I was shown telepathically. But we can already see this using technology. We should be able to see it with our eyes, or at least for sure with our spiritual eyes, we could see it once we move into that astral plane or whatever you want to call the next level of consciousness. But the reason we're not seeing it here is because we've been modified so that we're basically blind. We only see a very small...
We are effectively blind, really, if you look at our capabilities and we look at the spectrum.
Yeah, the spectrum is about like this big. We only see this much. The same as for our hearing on the physical realm. But once we move into that other spiritual, once we tap into that. So the thing is, when the force starts moving through you, you will feel a super conductive energy. It's sometimes it presents itself light. That's why a lot of times you see the so-called halo depicted on people they're having, that are spiritual or whatever religious experience. But it's coming from creation, the force. It is consciousness. It is energy. It ultimately becomes matter, but even matter is not solid. It's just wave patterns that interact with one another, creating interference patterns. The study of that is called cymatics.
Yes.
Everything is spirit in its fundamental form. So the fact that we're being told that this entity had such a strong connection to the spirit realm, I guess we'll call it, it doesn't surprise me that he would be able to emit light, because ultimately everything is, okay, so the lowest level of consciousness is matter. The next level is energy. Well, we could see that as light. Certainly. In consciousness, we typically don't see it. We just know it because we're part of it. It's self-referential. And so it doesn't register well on machines, because machines are very low level of that same waveform.
Right.
Well, machines are designed and the technology is designed to find what you're looking for, right?
Exactly.
Oh, good point.
As opposed to what you may not even know exists.
Right.
And that's why
anomalies pop out and they go, well, what's this?
Yeah, typically that's how at least here and now, because a lot of the stuff that we have allegedly discovered, I think was given to us, and it is dark technology that was designed to control us and also confuse us badly.
Yes.
very, very misleading, a lot of this stuff. Here's one for you guys. The tree of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was badly translated as well, intentionally, by the way. It was actually the Sumerian word would be me, pronounced may. The me of knowledge was the tablets of destiny. But it was not a tablet either. It wasn't a crystal. Our ancestors would not have had any way of writing about technology that they didn't understand. There was zero context for not only electricity, let alone networked wireless technology. So when they said that they took the fruit from the tree, what they really were talking about was the manifestation, the technology of the me technology, the ME technology.
And wasn't that supposed to be some kind of, pyramidal shaped item, or is that?
It depends which narrative or historical reference you're talking about. It's described as, think about it. We have all different types of network technology, from small to large. Some of it could be, and look, the technology we have right now actually has chips in it that are ME1.
Yeah.
The chip in your phone is ME technology.
Yeah.
And it was allegedly gifted to us by Enki, even though he was told not to do it. We were at that point where he had genetically engineered us allegedly to a point where we could understand how to operate this at a fundamental level. And believe me, you can hand a child a cell phone or a tablet and they'll punch around on it, and they'll tinker with it until they actually start getting some feedback.
Oh yeah, they'll figure it out. And I see James Dean in the back. It reminds me that we're unaware of some of the height of technology that was available in the Old Testament. There was actually motorcycles in the Old Testament. It clearly states that David's triumph was heard throughout the land. So there was a lot of high technology in the Old Testament that we don't know about.
Well, a lot of that stuff belonged to the gods, extraterrestrials, and it still does. But in our lifetimes, and slightly before that, the last century, things have changed dramatically for whatever reason. Okay, we can only speculate because they're not exactly.
Oh, that's Steve McQueen, not James Dean.
Yeah, that's right. My neighbor from Malibu.
Right.
So the bottom line is that we are being granted access to these technologies, but I don't think it's for our own benefit, generally speaking. If you look at the testimony of William Tompkins, he said that the Nazis made a deal. However, I was going through it the other day. He said prior to that, Maria Orsic and those secret society, the Vril Society, they'd already made a connection with the Nordics, and that they were supposedly going to build transports to get people off the planet, because the Nordics knew that the reptilians were going to plunge us into a depths of the darkness. The dark side is something that they oppose clearly, and they had to figure out a way to get some of their people out of harm's way. So
the Vril has kind of got a bad name, possibly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's weird that you say that, Robert, because I've always had that. I know everybody, the Vril, they're bad, but I've always had this thing in my gut that says, not so fast. There's something about these guys, and a lot of them ladies with really long hair.
Yeah, and that they were getting communication from Aldebaran, which allegedly is Enki's base, but who knows? That's just what Wes Penry says. It's hard to say for sure because, but we do know that one thing for sure: there's a war going on, and it's not over. It's been raging for a long time in the heavens. It's including the Earth and the entire solar system. Yeah. And so that's been my hesitation or trepidation about Space Force being abused. And this is something dark journalist. I just came across this stuff recently. He was talking about how Space Force, the deep state, the dark forces that are satanic and Luciferian, wanted control of the Nordic inspired Space Force that was generated here over decades. They wanted to take control of it during the last presidential election. That's why they were so pissed that they didn't get that, because it's not just about America. It's about this world, the moon, and the other colonies that are going to be established. And they're not going to be just regular colonies. They're going to be military bases all throughout. I'm sure they already exist.
Was there a timeline shift in 2016?
I guess something happened Look, the opposition.
We were talking about the other day, weren't we, Bauer, a professor, that was it a timeline shift? And yeah, I mean, you felt it too.
Oh yeah. Well, what's your thoughts, Robert, on the cosmic war?
And we got to wrap this up, guys. We're over time, but I want to be respectful of your time.
What do you think that this is a replay of what happened on Mars and the cosmic war in heaven, as elucidated by Joseph Farrell?
Yeah, it's, as I said, it's ancient, it's ongoing, it's not limited to this solar system. I don't think it's even limited to this galaxy. So, and we're involved in it, whether we like it or not. Most people are blissfully ignorant of the facts. And I feel very sorry for them as they become awakened to the reality, because it's good and it's bad. It's a combination of, but at the end of the day, though, I'm really optimistic, because ultimately,
I was just going to ask you that. What's the takeaway? What's the lesson that we can take away from this?
Well, first of all, we're not alone in the universe. That was a huge lie. And more importantly, that we're all related. That means not just here on this world, but all worlds, all throughout creation. Oh. So we have a huge extended support group out there.
Wow. That's empowering.
And ultimately, too, the dark side of the force is unsustainable. As we choose, and a lot of us are going to have to choose here in the next few years, as we choose to either work with the light or the dark side, that will decide our fate. Okay, so we do have some element of free will here that we have to exercise, and this is a very important transition point that a lot of souls are going to experience. And it's going to be shocking. It is shocking, as you see the news every day, more and more and more, until like everything is going to be revealed, not just by me and you guys, but it's time. This is the apocalypse.
Robert, what happens to the people that choose darkness or the dark side?
Yeah, I don't know, because I didn't choose that side. I can't really, I imagine they were going to suffer and ultimately lose a lot of their divine gifts, their abilities that come with working with the force, such as manifestation. The laws of manifestation are actually quite simple, but profound.
Right.
And if they are abused, you lose it. You lose that ability for good reason.
So would that mean that the folks that are battling in the heavens and the galaxy and the universe, the dark guys are eventually going to lose and the light guys are going to win? Because, I mean, if it's been going on for so long, there's either a whole lot of them or there's a great deal of force that's being manipulated one way or the other. I always like to say, make sure that the source of the force is guiding your course, because that's something that if you're paying attention and you're awake, I'm a Taoist, so the whole focus of chi energy and the yin and the yang and that interplay of dark and light is something that is just something will continue to be, but it's so much easier just to be in a place where you're choosing, as you said before, being compassionate, being, someone who is thinking about what is it that I can contribute positively to whatever interaction I'm having. They're obviously having a hard time with that in the galactic wars.
Yeah. It's not that simple, again, because we're talking about family feud. I've explained this before, specifically that there's an illness, a spiritual sickness that has occurred within our family, galactic and cosmic family. There's an illness. So, and it's a lot like a rabid dog. You love your dog and you don't want to kill your dog, but your dog doesn't even remember you anymore. It can't be part of your family because of the parasite. So that's a whole nother thing I've described before. So a lot of the people on the dark side, a lot of those souls are what we call sleepwalkers. Those of us that work with the light are skywalkers. We have the ability to transit anywhere we want in spirit using the force, or more specifically, the web of light. I'd like to leave you guys with a Jedi prayer, if I may.
You certainly may.
Okay. So, dear Mother, Father, creator of the force, thank you for providing for all our needs and guiding all our deeds every day and every way. Thank you for leading us not into the dark side of the force. Thank you for sending your angels of light to watch over us as we journey through our lives. And thank you for helping me to help others be happy, healthy, and whole. I'm eternally grateful for all you do for us, and I love you with all my heart and soul. Peace be with you now and forever. So be it. It is so.
I like that. Final words from you, Robert Bauer.
I am honored to be among people who are seeking the light as a seeker myself, because I got to tell you, if you don't have light, you can't have darkness, right?
Yeah.
And finding that light and finding that way in which one can at least tune into the light, let alone be able to grab the bulb and shine it around, is one of the most important things I think we're all starting to experience, whether we like it or not.
True.
So
Absolutely.
grab the light, be the light, and be in the light, so that the source of the force can guide your course.
Cool.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you, gentlemen. An honor and a privilege to be with the great people that are in the chat room. I salute you for being here, seeking after truth. Robert, could I impose on you to end our program with the great little saying you have with being kind, caring, and so forth?
Yeah. In order to connect with the web of light, I recommend people being calm, kind, creative, and courageous, because that connects you to the cosmos, the force, because it increases your resonance. In order to tune into that frequency like a radio, you have to you have to tune into it. It's not going to tune down to you. You got to tune up to it. Yeah, it's the only safe, sane way I know how to do that. So be calm, kind, creative, and courageous, and you will connect with the force.
For Robert Stanley and Robert Bauer, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. It's been a privilege to be with you, gentlemen. Please stay right there so I can say goodbye to you personally. In the chat room, we salute you for being here, seeking after truth. We'll be back next Monday night, 9 p.m. Central, with Laura Eisenhower for a discussion that'll probably be very much like this one. Robert Stanley, thank you for being our guest.
My pleasure.
Robert Bauer, thank you for being persistent and being our great co-host. And we thank you, our audience, because without you, it wouldn't be much of a show. Until next week, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, reminding you this is the last generation of real humans. So let's get busy.